hello to everybody here. And I'm really pleased to see there's so many people actually in the room doing things around the carbon space, which I really have seen this for a long time now, trying to get it going. So the last speaker we had up here from Precision Pasture did a wonderful presentation around the Australian carbon credit unit, the government-backed system, and I don't represent the aquip simply because even though I think they've done a wonderful job getting it set up, it's really a difficult one for a lot of farmers. So I want to kind of talk a little bit more about other systems that are out there. First of all, I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Samantha from Earth, and a little bit later on I'll be having my other half, my business partner, Tom Nicholas, who'll come up and talk about more from his perspective, which is really what he does on the land with the farmers. Okay, so an overview is a lot of people don't actually really know what soil carbon is. It's probably one of the critical questions I get. So it's a lot more about biology and biodiversity than people realise. Carbon actually in a nutshell is life. It's life in your soil. You can think of it, I talk about it as cathedrals in the soil. It's the architecture from which everything else, life can exist. And my whole focus for the last 27 years has been around getting funding to farmers, getting them paid for nurturing the land and looking after it. So the critical things about some of the carbon that we represent is that there's no government contracts involved, which I think a lot of the farmers that are not doing aquip projects are concerned about doing something that locks them in for 25 years, particularly when a lot of the farming community are quite a lot older than wanting to stay doing the same thing for 25 years. And the other thing that's really we're very proud about is that for the last 2 years we've been working on helping a new methodology get into the international European markets, which are a lot further ahead than we are in terms of enforcing this space. And they've got quite strict rules and regulations around carbon emissions being reduced, and when they can't reduce them anymore, buying offsets. So they're pushing pretty heavily for them, whereas the aquip is only sold in Australia to Australian residents. So they're quite different protocols, and also a lot of other things people don't realise is that in 2025, early 25, farmers and all businesses, well let's just say businesses, are going to be required to report on their environment, social and governance, or ESG reporting or footprint, their effect of what they're doing that is costing nature. And this will come and have effect back along the supply chains, which farmers are already experiencing. So this is really trying to tell you, you're going to have to start looking at this. You're going to have to start looking at biology and biodiversity as critical to not only the future of the soil, but also to your financial future. So the thing that we work on at Earth is we aggregate farms for international purchases. And we are trying to put the carbon market into your future. Overview of the soil carbon, that it's not trees. So this photograph that I've got here of these two plots of land, this is showing you two dairy farms that were right next door to each other. I'll just do a quick photograph just to show you. The farm on your left that's got no trees is the farm that was taken that was conventional, and the farm on your right with all the trees, they had hand planted 25,000 trees on that farm. He had 10 times more carbon in his land than the guy next door, and the taken on the same day. So another thing to keep in mind is that is flood water, so the water amount is controlled. And these photographs, sorry I keep moving away from the sound, the photographs here where you've got this very dry, cracked land, the thing that's interesting is that was after a 12-year drought, and the farmer here, the biodynamic farmer, that's protocolled, you can see the dark black descending into the soil because it was red soil that it started with. That's really an indication of the carbon. It's not that complex. You can see the roots descending down, and that's really the plants are pumping that carbon into the ground. So he couldn't believe it that the other guy wouldn't change what he was doing. I don't know if you can see the inset from that photograph, but the land was grey compared to the bright green of the biodynamic farm, and it had thistles all through it, and he was literally spending 4 times more on his water bill at a very high cost time because he was having to use so much more water because the land was hydrophobic. You can see it was all cracked, and this other one here where the rich carbon soil was not cracked and it was easily absorbing the water. So this is really about unlocking new revenue streams. Soil carbon isn't just about farming anymore, it's investing in soil coring and scientific data collection. You're improving your land and creating a commodity that can be sold in the international markets to create a bolster against changing markets and laws. The carbon stored in your soil can be converted into tradable credits, providing a consistent income stream which isn't just theory. It's a proven strategy, and my other half up here, Tom, will be coming out and talking a bit about some of the case studies of projects of high biodiversity around Australia that we know have got much more carbon than neighbouring properties by integrating in these more regenerative systems that are also increasing productivity, much like Hamish spoke about in his pasture presentation. It's a win-win for the farmer whether you sell the carbon or not. I talk about the science and why soil is an asset is that it's really important for the marketplace, for the story. That is the critical thing people are not understanding. It's all very well to talk about what do you do, how do you measure it, people want to sell it, but we're selling it internationally, and the international market, the big thing they're wanting is traceability. That's why you need the science. You need the traceability of who measured it, who tested it, who valued it, and then for actual purchase of it, they want to know the story. They want to know the biodiversity. They want to know what you've done on the land that is why they're paying you. A carbon credit or asset that you need to look at is a payment for works done. It's not, oh, well, I just go and lock the land up. No, this is about actually possibly farming it more or adding more activity into the land process that you're doing. And without all that data being independently verified, the market is really worried because of all the greenwashing. There's actually thousands and thousands of tonnes that are being wasted now because there was a lot of lies going on in the space about trees that weren't even there, and a lot of people think of carbon credits as only being about trees. And we basically don't touch the trees other than as biodiversity habitat and major pumps taking that carbon into the soil. And we recommend you doing soil cores around the trees rather than measuring the trees themselves, because soil carbon is really the Rolls Royce of carbon measurements. And Tom can go out on your land and do a soil core sampling. We can get a carbon project done. It's very similar in process to the aquip. It's just got a few variables about it, and we're very proud about having spent the time to finally get the system that we're about to launch actually onto one of the largest carbon markets in the world and get through a very long, arduous due diligence system because of all the greenwashing. So measuring it is, again, I just throw some things in here. My book goes into all of this stuff, so I'm not going to go into too much depth. I'd love you to go and buy my book. This is the launching date for it. Carbon is not a dirty word, and it's really about the governance and trading and looking at all these things around soil carbon. So they do measure with satellite. We do soil cores. There is other systems, and I go into what all those things mean, but we really believe that the soil cores down to at least a metre is a critical way of seeing the sequestration part, because carbon does cycle in and out of the land. In the top sort of section, it is affected by weather, but you really start to get sequestering at about 40 centimetres depth. So we're really asking you to look at doing the deep soil cores is pretty critical to that. So the market reality is that the European demand is big, and there's actually a lot that you don't see because it's only sold within the wholesale market, B2B, so it's not really public facing. Businesses are buying carbon for their own offsets within their own system. So a lot of people say to me, but there isn't a market, there isn't an exchange, and we don't need to sell it. And I say, well, if this is a 1-year credit, it's a critical difference between the aquip, which is a 25-year credit. The one we're doing is a 1-year credit. So getting that across the line as a new methodology and a new way of looking at it has been a really big ask, with lots and lots of due diligence and scientific protocols and people reading it all. So we're almost there. We're very excited about being able to, because we look at being able to sell the first 2 million tonnes through this system, which will mean that the farmer can then afford to plan for it, do it with, and then we, enter the market as a yearly contract rather than a 25-year commitment. Why you need to choose us is that we are really looking a lot at the methodologies. We won't just represent one, but at this point we're really only working on the one. That we will look mainly at, does it have the right transparency? Is it improving the carbon ongoingly? Are you improving biodiversity? And are you making money? Like, we really want you to be making money. My whole key thing is driving new revenue streams and funding into Australian and global farmers, because farmers are suiciding at a tremendous rate all over the world as they're not being paid what it costs to grow food. So we're in a key position with so much land to be able to actually really drive a very healthy system and really contribute to a lot to the carbon process in improving it. It's also about future-proofing your farm and adapting to change. So the global push for carbon reduction isn't slowing down by getting involved now. You're securing an additional income stream and positioning your farm to thrive in a future where carbon management is crucial. This is where I'm saying the ESG laws coming in next year will really affect you. Long-term benefits are beyond the immediate financial gains. Investing in soil health and carbon banking also improves your land's long-term productivity, which I think is obvious to everybody, and the resilience for the climate. And the key point being biodiversity. I wanted to just show this little pie chart up that we have the potential to sequester 1 to 3 gigatons per annum. The globally that we emit as a species, we emit roughly 40 gigatons. And I think people don't realise that when they don't understand if all farms went regenerative, we could actually solve a lot of the climate problem here with 70, 80 gigatons per annum, that farmers could solve this problem. That's why I've always been so passionate about saying you guys are the solution, not the problem. I'll just introduce Tom a little bit. He actually spent his farming life in Claremont in Queensland, and he gave up farming about 15 years ago to spend his life going around talking to farmers, telling them about carbon and trying to advocate and get farmers paid for developing carbon in land. So what he doesn't know about soil carbon, I don't think anybody knows. So on that note, I will put it to the audience and see if there's anything anybody would like to ask Tom about how to go about doing a carbon project.
Yeah. Hello.
Can you just get the microphone to her?
Yeah, thanks, Samantha. Hi.
Sorry.
Biodiversity. How are you measuring biodiversity in soil?
What's that?
How are you measuring biodiversity in the soil?
That's a curly question.
You're welcome.
There is metrics now being put together to do that, but yeah, generally speaking, you just have to look at the how many beneficials you had, the balance of the fungi and bacteria in certain different farming systems, because they do vary. And probably the king would be, do you or do you not have mycorrhiza fungi working? Because they drive it. And so, yeah, it is early days for that sort of thing, and some people are grappling to put all that stuff together. And some of the more organic people think they've got something. But yeah, to actually, I mean, you can measure the biology, and you can sort of come up with, there's X amount of biology, but what is it? What's it do? Is it beneficial? And so that's something that's still been worked on, actually. But as far as that being part of the metric, there's enough work done where we can come up with what's better than something else. So, and just like the carbon markets, it's still in its infancy. Yeah.
I was just wondering if you could give some advice, because there's so much talk out there and I guess a lot of noise, and for a lot of farmers it's been quite confusing. Is there any kind of simple advice you'd give to someone who is interested in the space but doesn't know a lot about it?
Simple advice for farmers that are not in the space.
What's that?
Is there any simple advice you can give to the farmers who are just want to know but don't know anything about it? Something sort of simple way of getting into the space.
Well, every farmer has a different entry point. Some things, I mean, of the projects that have been done, and we've, like the Hamish was talking about, aquip projects, and the ones that have had done the second test and come up with a figure, every one of them that did reasonable management made twice as much money per hectare out of the carbon as they did out of the animals that they had to run to build the carbon. Yeah, there he is, got his arms folded.
Come here.
What I can't work out is why that doesn't unfold the farmer's arms. But it doesn't, because we've got all these other pressures on us. We're in America, and it was in an Amish area, and there was this Amish agronomist fella, and that question come up. And he said, it's one farmer at a time. And so everyone's different. And something will happen to you. All of a sudden you'll be listening to something that's not even what I'd think would be relevant, and somebody, they pick it up and it changes the way they look at things. All of a sudden they start accessing information. So it is a hard one. And when you've got, now that brings up something that's really important. When you've got big business that supplies farmers with inputs, making sure that this thing doesn't get legs, it makes it very hard. And that's what's been happening. And that's not just me that thinks that. Like, that's come from the UN. Everyone knows that the chemical companies don't want farmers to build carbon, because their business model, bottom line, shot to pieces if they start building carbon. So that's what we're up against. And now the way farming's going with the high tech and everything, with it just that focused on getting the next year's crop, we're not thinking about anything else, you know. But to be honest, I can put out all the information of why, and all the farms that I've been on and seen what they're doing, and doing brilliant stuff and achieving great things with less money, and but it doesn't make any difference. You just the person you're talking to probably just not on that level, and so it's a really tough one. And I think one farmer at a time is probably the right answer.
I think Hamish had a question.
Thanks, Tom and Sam. A question on methane. I personally get really sick of this big statement of agriculture's emissions, 17% of our emissions, and methane's the big problem. To my simple understanding, a hectare that's got sheep or cattle, ruminants, not being overgrazed but efficiently being grazed, yes, they're producing methane, CH4, but that still converts to water and CO2 that then still comes back. Do we have any idea what a livestock business net emissions might be? We keep hearing 17% of agriculture's, it's our 17% of our emissions. Well, what's the net number? And am I right in thinking that there is a cycle that's happening with ruminant production that people are forgetting about and laying unfairly blame on livestock?
Yeah, methane.
I've got something to say on it too.
There's a process called that, of course, the scientists and the people that get money for research are not going to tell you about, because they won't get any money for research. There's a natural process called photooxidation. And basically what it is that the ultraviolet light creates a reaction between the water molecule and the ozone molecule, and you get two hydroxyls. and they're like quite highly active, radical, and they're looking for another hydrogen. They grab it from the methane, but they'll also they break down carbon monoxide as well. And because we're putting more of that up, well, that's taken away some of the hydroxyls that would break down the methane. But cows in an open paddock, especially if there's green grass and any transpiration happening at all, you're getting that much of these hydroxyls built. The methane coming out of those cows is going nowhere. No one's ever measured that.
Can I ask another one? I just want to add into this that there is science going on this, and there's a group in Switzerland that have been funded that are doing something now that will come out with this to disprove the methane discussion. So it's not released yet because they're trying to get the peer review process, and then on that academic level, they're all struggling. They don't want to lose their grants. So there's quite a lot of problems with it, but they've proven already that it isn't what we're all hearing, but the farmers are going to be taxed on it. So it is problematic. The other thing to be aware of is that unlike Australia, a lot of people are doing things in high density situations. It's like 50% are grain fed and having things come in off the land, which isn't really, we do about 6% grain finishing, and it's not the same as the indoor high density production. So it's not apples for apples, which is really unfair. And there's a recent paper just came out about the bacteria released by trees that actually ameliorate the methane as well. And there's soil eating methane in the ground. So all the stats are done about an animal in a shed. And so if you're doing free-ranging grazing, it's very difficult because it isn't the same thing. And we're hoping the science will come out that we can then lobby against the governments with this. But obviously that would put places like Holland at a disadvantage, or the Dutch community, which are very, very big in running international. Anyway, I think you get the picture. I'll leave it at that. I'm getting too political.
I'll add to that. That process of photooxidation that makes the hydroxyls, up till 1990, that was keeping the methane at 800 parts per billion. And when Russia collapsed and there was all these fugitive oil and gas leaks, it went up. And the oil and gas industry didn't want the finger pointed at them, so they blamed the cows. That's what happened. And then the vegans have run with it or whatever. But that process is, the hydroxyls are called the detergent of the atmosphere. And there's billions of tonnes of it made. And we're getting more methane from the tundra and all that. That's a big problem. But as far as blaming cows, just ridiculous. And sure, a feedlot with 100,000 head, you're going to have a column of methane going up. That's for sure. But cows out in the paddock, in fact, animals evolved to manage the grasses, and if we haven't got them doing their thing across our land, we won't get as much ozone produced to make the hydroxyls. So nature's, it's a typical, that's how nature works.